Hello, everybody. This is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3, broadcasting out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also, we're on Roku, Facebook, YouTube, and other internet platforms, and also, most importantly, the UPRN Talk Radio website, or .com as they say. And I just listened to the 30-second countdown. They have a new background music. There's no tension in it whatsoever, which I think radio should have a little bit of tension in it, because we're exploring new things and bringing up issues, and I like a little tension in it personally. Um, anyway, we have our guest today, and I am going to bring her on, Dani Katz. Hey, Dani, how you doing?
Hi, Bart. I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I am really good. It's really great to have you on the show again. You were here 7 or 8 months ago with a book on languaging better, language of betterarchy.
The Language of Betterarchy, a blueprint
Yes,
for uniting against tyranny.
exactly. And today we're going to explore a little bit more about languaging, but I just wanted to begin the show by just reading out a biography of Dani. Dani is a languaging expert and a catalyst for accelerated evolution, with a background in journalism and consciousness expansion, and a focus on root causes and solutions. Dani has dedicated her career to supporting individuals in claiming their empowerment, agency, authenticity, and in optimizing organization systems and societies with quantum language. In her new book, Pop Propaganda and Illustrated History, it is an illustrated compendium of 21st century medium manipulation techniques, tools, and trickery. Pop Propaganda was written and illustrated by real deal bona fide journalists to empower us to think critically, to recognize persuasive disguise as public service, and to not take the bait. And boy, I don't know. It's kind of like the whole world is in this, but particularly America, how we are inundated with so many messages, and being able to sort through all of this and see what's resonates, what's true, what is propaganda, what actually makes us laugh because it's so crazy sounding, um, and why people buy it and don't buy it. Welcome to the show,
Thanks,
Dani.
Bart. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe you ought to just start with a question, real simple. How does propaganda affect us today?
Whew. Right now, we are being riddled with a 24/7 onslaught of propaganda coming through our every screen, bus bench, billboard, magazine, newspaper. I mean, it's really, truly everywhere. Um, the rules of engagement around journalism have changed drastically since I was in journalism school. So back then, the newspapers and magazines and broadcast outlets were still following a semblance of journalistic ethics, wherein they weren't editorializing, they weren't telling us how to think, they weren't exaggerating, they weren't lying. Propaganda has infiltrated everything from movies and television, where they used to be about characters and rich plots and human emotions. Now those things are secondary and thoroughly one-dimensional as means of propping up political and ideological propaganda that is filtered through literally everything coming at us. All of our entertainment, all of our pop music, the pop music that wants to tell us that we're nothing if we don't have a Birkin bag or a Rolex or Rolls or a bunch of, women or men or whatever it is, right? So we have, music decimating our self-esteem. We have television and movies telling us who we should vote for, who we should dehumanize, right? We create these very one-dimensional stereotypical characters so that every villain is going to be a white man who loves guns, who votes Republican, who is a misogynist, right? That's kind of the formula at this point.
Mm-hmm.
See, every family on television is like mixed race with some sort of gender confused, spectrum like teenager. We have all of our celebrities telling us how we should think, how we should vote. They're all telling us, who we should vote for as though they're experts in the realm of politics when really they're just paid pretenders. All of our, advertising was always a great realm for propaganda, but they were trying to persuade us to buy things or to buy into a certain lifestyle. Now you have product lines pushing ideological agendas, pushing, it doesn't matter if it's, feminism or pro-trans or whatever it is, but these things are being shoved down our throat 24/7. And because of the internet, right now they have so much more access, whereas in the original days of the printing press, mass media would get like maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of people. Then we had radio, which expanded it quite a bit. Then we had television, which sent it into the millions, and that really changed everything because television paired visuals with messaging. And what we started to learn, what neuroscience learned, is that it puts the brain into a more hypnotic state wherein we're infinitely more suggestible. Our critical thinking capacities are taken offline and we just absorb the information. But now with the internet, billions and billions of people are being reached really every second. So I realize that was a long answer to your question. We're being influenced massively, massively every moment of every day.
Well, if there's anything that we can get from this, is like it's a huge topic that integrates everywhere, and very few people have an answer for it. I mean, for me, I'm kind of opposite in that I have a lot of quiet time. I listen to the radio very little. I watch TV minimal and pick up stuff on the internet, but still, it's really hard to sort through this. And, it always just brings up the questions like, why do people who think very radically different than me think the way they do? It's just such a mystery on all of that. And, they're tuning into these messages. And it doesn't matter which side of the political fence you are or what socioeconomic group you are. We get attracted to certain things and we repetitively kind of jump into the pool or let it pound us again and again and again, almost like an overkill. Am I getting that kind of right?
You are getting it totally right. And I really appreciate you saying it. The sides don't matter. The sides are an illusion, right? The sides are propped up by the larger social engineers behind the scenes, who are, operating with the age-old divide and rule strategy. And so a big part of that is that we're getting completely different news, depending on which bubble we're in. And instead of pulling back to the macro and realizing, wait a minute, we're all getting played. Like as an entire human family, we're all being snowed. A lot of us are taking the bait because we haven't clued into the propaganda tactics. And then we double down on our side is right, your side is wrong. When both sides are wrong. This whole thing is really ridiculous, and it's meant to keep us so distracted with our own infighting around identity issues and ideological issues and silly things, like whatever the distraction of the week is, so that we're not paying attention to the oligarchs in charge who are really doing all of us as individual people a disservice. And that's why, and I have compassion for my fellow human beings who didn't go to journalism school, who aren't studied up on the techniques of propaganda because we all come by our ideas and our allegiances honestly. And I think most people don't realize how co-opted the media has become, and how propagandized we all are. And that's why I ultimately decided that my smartest move in helping us as humanity wake up is to start to share these propaganda techniques so we could start to see the method behind the madness. Because once we see how the propaganda is operating, then we're resourced to not take the bait and to realize, oh, this is all a giant sham, which is going to make it much easier for us to come together and unify together for our own best interests and stop letting the predator class bully us around.
Yeah, it's so well said, and it's just like, let's start with the juicy stuff. Uh, can you tell us some of the techniques that you see going on that out in the world and what to watch for?
Sure. So the first one that comes to mind is cherry picking, where someone in the media will take, let's say, a quote out of context, right?
Uh-huh.
Or they'll take a piece of the information and
Oh,
they'll put
yes.
that forth as though that's the whole story. But because it's been taken out of context, it's only part of the story. And there are a million examples of this, but I also want to honor the no politics beautiful precept you have for your show. But it's very easy to see examples of cherry picking. And the very easy solution to that is anytime we see a quote or we see like a talking head on the news giving us their opinion of a certain bill or mandate, our smartest move is to look it up ourselves. Go to the government website, look up the bill, look up the original speech that is being quoted, and so that we can understand the actual context of what was being shared.
Is there an actual website that you could access?
Well, on like any bill that's passed,
Right?
if it's a spending bill or a defense bill or a censorship bill or whatnot, we can access that on a website, on the government website, and we can look it up and read it ourselves to see, which I recommend we all do, because unfortunately we're in a time where our journalists and anchors really cannot be trusted, because they're all serving a larger agenda, right?
Yeah.
These are, none of our news outlets are impartial or neutral anymore. They're all part of a larger corporate oligarchy. So the best way that we can stay informed is to look things up ourselves. Any quote, said by, any elected civil servant, we can go look up the original transcript or the speech in its entirety and start to educate ourselves on the actual context. Trusted leaders is another propaganda technique that the social engineers are leaning into big time, because humans are prone to groupthink. Not all of us, but a lot of us, because back in primal days, it was very dangerous to our survival to be kicked out of the tribe, right? And we all still have the amygdala. We also have that lizard brain that's operating on those old memories of, oh, a saber-toothed tiger might kill me, or if I get kicked out of the tribe, I'm going to die of exposure, or a dinosaur is going to rip me apart.
This is almost like creating these leaders as our mother or father figure as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, and that brings us into authority, which I'm happy to get into next. But because people so want to belong, instead of trying to persuade, a million individuals, the social engineers will just get a single trusted leader. And these days, our trusted leaders are pop stars, are actors, are podcasters. They'll get them to speak whatever persuasion or propaganda, and then they'll trust that is being absorbed and internalized by the millions of people listening to them or tuning into them. So it's very effective for the social engineers to rely on trusted leaders to disseminate their propaganda. I love what you just said about the confusion of the mother-father figure, because I feel like this is the root cause of where we're at as a society, because we've misunderstood what authority really means. And so through years and generations of indoctrination, We have all been programmed to believe that authority is something that lies outside of us. We need external validation. We need external permission to do something. We need other people to approve of us. And so, because of this, we have people who are always looking for experts or someone, with initials after their name to tell them how to live their lives, what choices to make, how concerned they should be, right? We'll hear that on the news all the time. And so, because a lot of us have forgotten that authority is actually an internal job, right? It's our own God-given right to write our stories however we choose. Author, it, right? It's super simple. So I think because of that basic confusion, we do have a populace that's looking for leaders, that's looking to be told what to do and who to follow by so-called experts or whomever they've been programmed to believe, put on a pedestal.
Yeah, isn't that interesting in this world today where we have so much education and stimulus? One would think that it would promote people to go, what would I like to create that would fulfill my life? But people put so much energy in, I need to do what a pop star or a politician or a huge business leader does, and they're not asking that question, what would I really love to create and become?
It's an astute observation, and unfortunately that very important question, that kind of self-inquiry, is being dissuaded. It's being dissuaded through our current education system and the Common Core curriculum that's been installed. So critical thinking and original thinking is actually demonized in that system. And we're rewarded for parroting what other people before us have said. This has been my experience, not just in academia, but also in publishing, where, putting forth original ideas is not validated by publishing companies. It's only valid if I'm citing other people's ideas, right? So this, again, through generations and generations of programming, people have been really dissuaded from knowing themselves, from knowing their internal authority, from really connecting to their truth, their core values, determining those things for themselves. So there's a lot of work that we get to do as humanity to shift this and to, wake ourselves up out of this collective slumber.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because people start to say, this is my destiny, or this is the group that I'm following, and I follow that role model. And somehow they think that could be the spiritual journey, or the journey to actualizing themselves. Whereas actually it's more like, let's go create, what would you like to create today? And that teaches you how to become, by finding out what you're truly interested in. And, just like your own life, you're very passionate about languaging. And if there's anything that I've learned about you in the last 15 minutes, is your passion. You speak with it. It rivets me, and hopefully the audience. Like, this woman really is excited.
Thank you. Yes, I am. And I appreciate you mentioning creativity and what are we going to create today. And as a creator myself, I can say most of my books, my illustrations, everything that I've created has come out of, as you mentioned earlier in the show, you have a lot of silence and stillness and even boredom, right? Where there's not a lot of external stimulation. So I'm just alone with myself and my stillness, and I can tap into what wants to come through me. But when we're distracted by so many shiny baubles coming at us, bread and circuses, another, very effective propaganda strategy, is keep the masses distracted with entertainment and gossip, and junk food. So we don't have time to be bored anymore. bring a cell phone with me when I go out into the world ever.
Yay.
Yeah, I never do. And so very often I'm in the post office waiting, or I'm in a restaurant waiting for my food, and I'm the only one who's just sitting there doing nothing. Whereas it seems like the vast majority of my brothers and sisters out there are staring at a screen and scrolling on a screen, and they're very addictive machines that keep us from our own stillness, our own creativity, our own internal landscape.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think happens in a person? Maybe you can answer this, maybe not. It's a neurological phenomenon, or maybe more, that a person that's still, as opposed to a person that is scrolling all the time.
I think that we're dissuaded from knowing ourselves very deliberately. Like it's such an important Hermetic principle. Know thyself. And so knowing thyself, it can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable to sit alone in a restaurant and be like, am I a weirdo? Is there something wrong with me? Like, I'm just by myself. I don't have anything to do, right? But for those of us who've mastered that, and we know how valuable it is to really love being alone, we go through that process. We go through that internal process to find comfort within ourselves, to find our own approval, where it doesn't matter what some stranger thinks of me living alone, right? And that's where true empowerment lies, where we're not dependent upon external validation, but that empowerment and that self-generated authority and agency threatens the dominant control structure, which is why they go the distance to keep us away from doing that. And I think, a big part of our culture right now is like quick fixes and comfort and ease and convenience. So no one wants to sit with themselves, for 10 seconds and not be entertained.
Yeah. And to me, your own breath is an entertainment. Just feeling your breath and stuff. I was told by a psychic that I would have a encounter of Ram Dass, the famous speaker and author of such books as Be Here Now and The Only Dance There Is. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going to have a conversation with him. I'm going to meet him. This psychic tells me so. So I'll go and see him speak. And I did get to meet him. But all it was people lined up during the intermission, and we all hugged Ram Dass. And I got to feel his breath. And it was this long, slow breath that felt like a huge expanded cavern of breath. And I learned more in that situation than I could have ever heard some amazing, cute story. It's such a visceral reality that the media seems to miss. They don't teach you. They don't teach you how to feel that stuff.
Well, it's in conflict with their interests, because if they taught us to enjoy those things, then we wouldn't be mindlessly giving away our attention to the dross and drivel that they're putting out.
Pretty much true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you hear somebody on the whether it be a leader or a politician or somebody that's a messenger, so to speak, what are you looking for? I mean, what goes on through your head in that, with your skill set that you have?
I'm looking for authenticity. I'm looking for consistency. But I'm also looking for markers of controlled opposition or bad actors, which are, two other propaganda techniques we see flooding the space. So I was actually did a podcast yesterday with Charlie Robinson, he has the Macroaggressions podcast, and he very proudly identifies as a conspiracy theorist. I've certainly been called a conspiracy theorist too many times to count, but I just
What?
refer to I'm just a journalist. Like I'm a journalist. I simply do my research, and sometimes that takes me into realms that are demonized as conspiracy, but I'm
Okay.
really just good at my job. But what we were talking about was that for any good conspiracy theorist, all it is pattern recognition. I'm just at this point, because unfortunately I've realized there are far more bad apples than good apples in that space, just being very real. I'm looking for the patterns and the markers that show me that they are propping up a hidden agenda. And those
Mm,
are things, like I said, they're just, once you recognize the pattern, we can't unsee the pattern. Once we recognize the markers, we can't unsee the markers. So I'm looking for a willingness to speak truth that flies in the face of the dominant narrative, say like a Thomas Massey or a Ron Paul, someone who's speaking for real truth and real justice consistently, without
yeah.
exceptions, without I'm for free speech, except, like they just lost me there. So I'm
Well,
looking.
I think
Oh,
of a mutual friend that or mutual admirer because he gave you a recommendation on your books, which elated me. Like which is Richard Rudd, author of the Gene Keys. I bring him up all the time because I think that's a profound book, but his message is much of what you're describing right there.
um
Maybe.
I really want to be super respectful, and Richard is a friend of mine, and I really have a lot of warmth in my heart for him, and I have noticed some inconsistencies.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. And I just think that a lot of people, I think you're coming on with some really good stuff as seeing the markers and such of people. To me, I feel my gut a lot and see what I feel like right inside my gut when somebody speaks,
Mm-hmm.
which has some truth to it, and it has things that aren't reliable. And we're right at midpoint, so I just want to tell everybody that you are listening to Dani Katz at danikatz.com, and that'd be DANIKATZ.com, author of Pop Propaganda, Language of Betterarchy, Word Up. This is a wordsmith of magnitude, but also the truth and the misgivings and misguidings of how people communicate. With that, my name is Bart Sharp, and you're on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3 out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also on Roku, Facebook, YouTube, and the UPRN Talk Radio website, and many more. And I'm always amazed with how people's emotions connect to the speaker, and the speaker being aware of the emotions he's or she is stimulating and probably manipulating.
Mm. It's really juicy, and I want to
Juicy.
go. Yeah, it's a great lead in. I do want to go back to what you mentioned about your
Yes.
intuition, because I think that is really important, to honor our gut feeling, even if there's not a logical reason why. And part of what we're being invited to rebalance now as a society is the imbalance between the masculine and the feminine. And when I say
Mm,
that, I'm not referring to embodied men and women, but I'm talking about the energetic polarities that define this realm. And so reason and logic are masculine ways of being and contemplating, and emotion and logic are feminine. And so we can see the demonization of emotion and intuition as a very important, I would say, fundamental crux of the imbalance between the masculine and the feminine. So I think part of what we're doing now to rebalance them, right? I'm never lobbying for one to be superior to the other, right? But for the just right alchemical balance, it's recultivating our emotion and our intuition and honoring our intuition and honoring that, you know what, I get a weird gut feeling. I don't know why. I'm not going to go spreading negative gossip, but I'm just honoring that I'm getting a weird feeling about this particular speaker. And I think it's a very important skill to cultivate. I teach in my pop propaganda homeschool class. I teach the students how to recognize their internal yes and no. And we go through some visceral somatic exercises that so students can start to understand where yes lives in their body, where no lives in their body. What are the different qualities of sensation? Because that's a very empowering tool that will allow us to decipher truth from propaganda. So I did want to pick up on that.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
go ahead. No, you're good. Keep
I was
rolling.
going to say, as far as using language to generate emotion and then using language to manipulate emotion, that's one of the primary tenets of propaganda. Is that it has to be emotional, and usually those are negative emotions. Not always, right? We can see it, a bank commercial with a really cute puppy, or a woman getting, her father's giving her away on her wedding day, and these are going to generate feel good emotions that, because of the way, that the commercial is designed, will have us, more inclined to do business with this particular bank. But
Mm-hmm.
more often than not, they're negative. More often than not, it's fear. It's this like divisive blame thing. But I think fear is really, at least in the past, 10, 20, maybe 100 years, but been their primary tool to manipulate. And so, I mentioned it in an offhand comment, but it used to be the role of the journalist to present the facts from an objectively neutral place. And they would present the facts that represented one side of an issue, and they would present the facts that represented another side of an issue. Then they would leave it to the public to determine how they wanted to respond, what
Yeah.
meaning or conclusions they were going to make. Now, the phrase that I hear most often on the news is, how worried should we be? How concerned should we be? And so you'll have the journalist speaking to a quote unquote expert. And instead of asking the expert about the data or the statistics or the specifics, they're asking. So, first of all, they're feeding an emotion to the expert. They're saying, I'm giving you fear. We should all be afraid. You tell us how much fear we should be generating in our own autonomous bodies. So it's very infantilizing, and it's a very manipulative way of delivering this fear into the subconscious minds of the viewer, without the viewers realizing how they're being manipulated.
Yeah. I keep thinking about what I was raised with. I grew up in a rural area in Texas, farming people, generations of farmers. And they kept referencing, my grandfather and my parents, the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, their answer was, you just keep working hard and persevere, and good things will come to you. You'll break through all of this, but poverty is just around the corner. You always have to watch it. So they always sought the leadership in heroes that had those qualities. And so to me, that was a big working class ethic that I grew up with, this 60s, 70s, 80s. Today, it seems like the newfound wealth, high prosperity it's like one of those very trustable archetypes that people go, well, if they know how to make money right, I can trust them because they have something that I value. Or we may have something of, well, they're beautiful enough. They have all the right looks. I think of Kim Kardashian. She has a look that's phenomenal and people love her for it. We have so many of these different archetypes that people gravitate to that's kind of beyond them. I wasn't taught to think for myself about realizing my dreams. I was taught work hard,
Mm-hmm.
keep your blue collar on, and you'll good things will come to you. Um, you think that's one of those things that is how people manipulate? They find an archetype that people believe in, and they manipulate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's if anyone's familiar with Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB spy who defected to the United States in the 80s. And he gave a lot of lectures and interviews about what he called ideological subversion, which was the takedown of a country from the inside. And he was specifically talking about a communist takedown. But according to his ideological subversion, the first phase is demoralization, which is bringing down the moral values of a culture through over sexualization, through intoxicants, through glorifying crime, gun use, all of these things. We could see it through the proliferation of marijuana use. We could see every movie, every television show, they're always drinking alcohol. That's unquestioned in our culture, right? So these things like slowly chip away at our morality. You look at the way those elected to be our civil servants are speaking, and they're speaking in very casual, a lot of name calling, a lot of demonization and blame. It's really lowering the collective morality. We see some of our civil servants showing up for service in sweats, right? Instead of, dressed professionally. We see it in our news broadcasters who are dressed like they're going to go clubbing, right? They're no longer dressed like, I'm thinking of like Diane Sawyer or this more professional presentation. Now everyone, it's like all sexed up all the time. So all of these things contribute to the demoralization of the populace. And it's exactly as you said, the archetypes of being like a hard worker or someone who's honest or someone who's really creative or kind have been replaced with money and flash and snarkiness and sex appeal. And it definitely affects our culture at large, especially the young people who don't know any better, and are just absorbing these things and digesting them, and then ultimately will be modeling them.
So what you're saying, if being a guy and being attracted to women, if I'm watching a newscaster with a low cut blouse or something that shows cleavage, that's better, with red, nice hair, and nice looking, I'm going to believe her story more than somebody who's less attractive.
So it's possible.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
also,
I'm not trying to put controversy. I think that's very true.
well, and you're certainly going to like her better. Like you're
Yeah.
just going to be more drawn to that presentation because it's checking off some other boxes that really have nothing to do with journalism.
Yeah.
Right. But it's kind of going around the side and checking off some other things, so that it's like if you've ever had a cat or a dog who was sick and you have to give them medicine, we hide the medicine in peanut butter or cream cheese, right? So it's like the sexy outfits are the cream cheese to deliver the propaganda. And we're so distracted that our critical thinking mechanisms are just offline because we're like, wow, that's a lot of cleavage. And so the propaganda can just slip in, just like the pill we're trying to give our golden retriever.
Yeah, it's so well said. It's happening all the time.
All the time. And it's the same, just to go back to fear for a moment, neuroscientists have proven that when fear hormones are flooding the body, our understanding of the possibilities available to us narrows quite a lot.
Yes.
And our critical thinking capacities also narrow quite a lot. So it really serves the propagandists to have us in a constant or very regular state of fear, because then we're more eager to absorb, whatever civil rights offenses, and anything that attacks our freedom, we'll more readily say, okay, sure, let's take it, because in the fear state, blinded by those hormones, we're not aware that other possibilities are available to us.
Yeah, wow, that's so well said. And at this time, you know, there's certain words that we can't say in the air in relation to that year 2020.
Right.
But just thinking of that time and also what we're coming up in upcoming times of these big changes. And so you got all of this, bigger than life news, and I'm being very diplomatic when I say that. And you're getting inundated with it. What are some of the things that you suggest to people before they, you know, start turning on the television or listening to this, or while you're listening to it? What should we be doing with your body uh, in, in keeping your own balance?
Well, I mean, for all of us, I mean, I'll just speak for myself.
Hmm.
For me, it keeps me in balance to meditate every morning so that I can understand what is my baseline. What do I want my baseline to be today? The past couple of days I've been dealing with some disappointing news in the business realm. I woke up thinking about it, but when I was on my meditation cushion, I thought, do I want to let this infect my day, or do I want to claim my role as a reality creator and decide how wonderful I want my day to go? Right? And so I made that deliberate choice and put some different visions and affirmations into my own system so that I could be radiating those frequencies. Um, the one thing that and of course, daily exercise and putting clean food into our bodies, but the primary thing that I recommend and that I do as a journalist, as someone who writes and teaches about propaganda, is if I'm watching the news or taking something in and I notice I start to get into a fear state or I start to get angry, I need to turn it off. And I need to go do something to put myself into the state that I want to be in. Similarly, if I find myself talking about any political issue or, supposedly elected civil servant, and I'm getting emotionally dysregulated, that is a clue for me that I'm under the spell of propaganda and I'm running a program. Because realistically, why am I getting so emotional about people I've never met and I truly don't know anything about? Or if I'm getting super emotional about some sort of policy decision that I haven't myself studied. So when I see myself becoming emotionally dysregulated or feeling the urge to demonize or dehumanize my fellow humans, that's when it's time for me to realize I'm running a program. I have allowed myself to be persuaded by propaganda, and I need to step away and figure out for myself what's the vulnerability in me? What in me is inviting healing, acknowledgement, and integration so that I could come back to neutrality around this? And, you mentioned 2020, and we don't need to go into the specifics, but a lot of what I realized was coming up for me around that time was my own fear of losing my freedom, and how often when I was in that dysregulated state, I would project that fear onto politicians, issues, or, my fellow brothers and sisters, and realizing, no, that's for me to do work on. If I think that my freedom is given to me by a politician or can be chipped away at by, an illegal mandate, then I have more work to do on myself to maintain my emotional sovereignty and my balance. So I'm such an advocate of just taking responsibility and doing our work.
Yeah, yeah, you really have to be grounded into yourself and know how you vibrate in every situation. Know what your vibration of peace and love inside of you is. Know the vibration of fear. Know the vibration of anger. What it feels like in your body. Is that's what I hear you, and I totally agree with it. And just another thing, it's like the rules have changed. It seems like at this day and age, and you might say, well, this is going into Aquarian age, expect it. It seems like the rules of the game change from year to year. You know, it is a fast moving society, and we had to have that basis. And the word that comes up for me is detachment.
I just got a chill. I got a full body chill when you said that. Yes, yes. Detachment is a superhero power for us right now, paired with neutrality. And just recognizing for me, like it's all theater. There are no sides. The string pullers behind the scenes want us to buy into it. And so, I look to the Aquarian superpower of detachment and really do my best to embody it. And I think that and our senses of humor are really powerful tools for what we're dealing with now.
Yeah, it really is. Maybe we should play life like it's a Monopoly game sometimes.
Yes.
It's kind of a fun little game that we play and be willing for, the good, the bad, and the ugly to show up, but you're going to be okay regardless.
Yes. 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 100%.
Yeah, yeah. I went to a fair or a festival yesterday, and it was like all of these alternative people of building houses for Pueblo Indians and uh, psychics, and we're talking about all of these alternative things. But this is a different generation than me, 20s, 30s, maybe some 40s. But I was always amazed that they just said, we're going to create something that we feel is meaningful and makes a difference in the world. It was a whole theme of the festival. And it was just so refreshing to say, we're taking action, and it's not about trying to improve a business system or a political system or a country. This is about actualization. And a lot of that is serving other people, but it's about our heart and soul getting active.
Mm-hmm.
It's really quite wonderful. It really sounds like that parallels a lot what your messages are.
It definitely does. And that's, certainly one of the primary messages of the language of betterarchy, which is, cluing us in a very granular, nuanced way of how we have been enslaving and disempowering ourselves by using the system's language. And that we don't need to go attacking the system and fighting the system. We can simply very gently and peacefully put down their language, pick up a language that is infused with frequencies that are infinitely more unifying, peaceful, abundant, empowering, inspiring, and fun. And given that this is a realm of frequency, we can start speaking that language, start speaking those frequencies out into the quantum field, and then living into the language, living into our visions of this better world that I'm sure everyone listening to your show right now is with us in wanting.
Yes, just to repeat what you're saying, the frequency creates the thoughts that create the language that you speak, and they all reciprocate each other.
Exactly. And our language creates our world. That's really the key. Understanding that everything we see in this realm was created and is sustained by language. I'll very often use the metaphor of the ocean. So if we were to suspend our disbelief and imagine a circumstance wherein something toxic was spilled into the ocean, which of course would never happen because we honor our planet so much better than that. But let's say something toxic spills into the ocean and it's affecting each of the sea creatures differently. So it's giving, the whale's gut problems. It's giving the starfish depression. It's giving the anglerfish gum issues, right? The way that The old way of doing it is let's bring in a bunch of different specialists for each different sea creature and give each one different pharmaceutical prescriptions or different protocols for their own individualized expression. Or we could simply purify the water. And when we purify the water, then everything just returns to homeostasis on its own. And so when I talk about, switching up our language, the language is that water. So a lot of times it can be very overwhelming to think, well, how are we going to change the justice system, the education system, the economy, all these things? And it's like, we purify the waters, we up-level our language, and we allow the solutions to emerge from that up-leveled language that we're all speaking together.
Wow. That's a wonderful sum up. Thank you so much. We're coming to the last 5 minutes of the show, and for right now, why don't you tell us some of the projects you got going on and describe pop propaganda for
Sure.
us in just a
So,
minute or so.
thank you, Bart, and thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation as I did our last one. So, Pop Propaganda, an Illustrated Guide, is the textbook that I created to go along with my homeschool course, which is a media literacy course created for teens as well as parents and grown-ups. And it is an 11-module course which is available digitally. It is available on my website. When people register, they get instant lifetime access, and it is a one-of-a-kind course. There's nothing else like this on the planet that's teaching teens and grown-ups how to recognize propaganda, how to safeguard our agency, our sovereignty, our critical thinking, at the same time as cultivating agency and confidence. So that's available. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow, Thursday the 13th, at the Geopolitical Turnings Conference, which is being held online through Apocatastasis Institute, which is an alternative higher learning institution. And I'm also teaching a Quantum Languaging 101 course through Apocatastasis Institute for high schoolers, college students, and adults continuing their education, and that starts April 3rd.
Do you have a website for that?
It's apocatastasis. I know it's so hard to.
Yeah, why don't you just spell that out?
Okay. It's APOCATASTASIS Institute. .wordpress.com is their website, and that's where you could find information about the geopolitical conference happening tomorrow and Friday. You can find out about the course that I'm teaching, and all the other amazing instructors at the Institute are also teaching.
Oh, wonderful. That sounds nice. And you also check out Dani at danikatz.com, DANIKATZ.com. And let's end the show. I generally end this with a 1-minute message that you would like to give the world of wisdom and advice, whatever that is. And while you think about that, I'm going to tell everybody that you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious. My name is Bart Sharp, and our guest today is Dani Katz at danikatz.com. And you are also on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3 out of New Orleans. Also on Roku, uprntalkradio.com, Facebook, YouTube, and other internet platforms. Next week, we will have the return of Hakeem Iwan, one of my I just find him so fascinating. This is personally fascinating. It's ancient Egyptian hematology, which is the most ancient study of Egyptian information. I always like to kind of dig it out of him, so to speak, or he just has so much to offer. So that's what we have next week. What parting wisdom do you have for us, Dani?
I'd love for us to remember how much power we really truly have, how much agency we really truly have. We are all reality creators here, and no one has any more say or sway as to how society shapes itself, in what direction our Earthship decides to go, than you and I do. I'd love us to remember that the social engineers really truly have no power whatsoever. If they did, they wouldn't have to lie, they wouldn't have to censor, they wouldn't have to coerce. It's all a reflection of how much power you and me and all of us have. So I'm really encouraging us to remember that, to cultivate it, to lead with that.
Ooh, good message. Thank you for so much for being on the show. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Yay! Thanks, Bart.
Thank you, hon.